County Council meeting of October the 27th. Everyone knows the way this is going to roll out. I'm going to call the roll call, and you're going to answer here. And if you get disconnected for any reason, try to get back in. We're going to wait for you for 5-10 minutes. If you can't get back in, we'll continue because we obviously have a quorum. We're not going to use the buttons at the bottom with the hands. If you have a question or want me to stop or you want something clarified, put up your hand and we'll go back to you. Is there any questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the agenda then, please. We'll take attendance. Councillor Wheat.
Here.
Councillor McAlpine.
Here.
Councillor Ferrier.
Here.
Councillor Howes.
Here.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Pierce.
Present.
Councillor Chambers.
Here.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller's here. Councillor Coleman.
Here.
Councillor Gatward.
Present.
Everyone's here. Second item on the agenda, please, is the approval of the agenda. Councillor Pierce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McAlpine, that the County of Brant agenda, taking note there is no addendum for this evening, so the County of Brant agenda for Tuesday, October 27th be approved.
Thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda?
I just have one question, Mr. Mayor, under questions.
Councillor Gatward?
Yes. I just have one question under questions.
All right, we'll wait and do it then. Call the vote on the agenda, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have anything? No one's, oh, Councillor Miller? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll declare pecuniary interest for 9D. D as in David.
D as in David. Is that the John Noble home?
It is. And then I'm not sure how to treat 4A, the presentation, because there's two people presenting, but they're under the same presentation in 4A, and there's two different asks. So I'm not sure how to treat that one. I could certainly declare, I would declare pecuniary interest for anything Mr. Wormhold asked to ask for the Life Care Center, but I should be sitting in on the hospice one. So like I said, I'm not sure how to treat that one.
I feel comfortable with you sitting in on both of them. Does anyone have a problem with Councillor Miller being involved with both, hearing both allegations from the same cause? Seeing none, I don't think you need a conflict there, Councillor Miller, if you're comfortable with that.
Okay, I will not ask questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Delegations. The first one is Julie and David from Sudman Hospice. Hello, Julie.
No.
Is it not David with her?
Yeah, David Wormold is with me. I'm not sure if he's joined yet.
I see Cam Johnson. We're going to get, Cam, you're going to go back into your waiting room.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Wormold's on now
there
as
he is.
well.
David's
There
here,
you go.
yes.
Thank you. Who's going to begin?
I am actually going to begin. So you've got my PowerPoint presentation there. Is it loaded? Someone's loading that up?
I hope so.
Yep, just 1 minute, I'm loading.
Okay.
There we go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Heather. So good evening, Mayor Bailey and County Councillors. My name is Julie Powell, and I am the new president of St. Joseph's Life Care Foundation, just starting back in June. And I'm joined this evening by David Warmold, and David is the president of St. Joseph's Life Care Center. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present this evening and present a request for funding consideration. Next slide. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of our organization. So representing St. Joseph's Life Care Center Brantford, which is a campus of care, and it includes Stedman Community Hospice, the Long-Term Care Center, as well as a number of community partners. I am with the foundation, and we are the official fundraising organization for both the Life Care Center as well as Stedman Community Hospice. David's going to speak to you shortly about the Long-Term Care Center, and I will share a little bit of information about Stedman Hospice. And just before we move on, I certainly wanted to extend a thank you to Council for your tremendous support of both of our organizations in the past. Next slide. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the hospice, but founded in 2004. And hospice is really a concept of care. It's a collection of programs and services that focus on the comfort and support of a patient and their family rather than a cure for disease. I'm sure many of you have either had an experience with the hospice through a friend or a family member, or have certainly heard about us from a friend or family member. We have a beautiful facility, but we're really so much more than our beautiful facility. For us, it's really all about caring for the community. Next slide. So I'm going to speak to the picture on the left shortly, but I just really want to share some numbers as far as the impact of the hospice in the community. So this is for a one-year time period from April 1st of 2019 to March 31st of 2020. So you can see some of the numbers. 146 patients were cared for through our hospice. 916 were cared for through our outreach services. So that's where our clinical staff go into the patient's home to help provide care. 655 supported through bereavement services. And then you can see the numbers specifically for the hospice and outreach specific to Brant County. So these are really just numbers, and I actually wanted to share a brief story with you about a family from Brant County. So the beautiful family in the photo in front of you is Russ and Lauren Barnes, along with their 3 daughters, Everly, Mael, and Eden. Diagnosed in October of 2019 with rectal cancer that had spread to her liver, this beautiful young mom was given just months to live. And live she did. She created beautiful memories for her husband and children. Lauren and her family received support in her home from the outreach team at Stedman Community Hospice. Receiving hospice care in their own home allowed the Barnes family to stay together until the last possible moment. Determined to stay home long enough to see her young daughter off to her first day of grade 1, Lauren spent a short time in hospice before passing away on September 8th of this year. So just one story I wanted to share with you. There are so many other stories of Brant County families that have been impacted by the hospice. Next slide. So hospice challenges, they really haven't changed over the years. The demand is growing dramatically for end-of-life care. Funding has not increased since we opened our doors. Only a portion of nursing care is funded provincially, and the hospice relies very heavily on community support through donations. Next slide. So the COVID-19 pandemic has really had a profound impact on Stedman, not just financially, but also in the way we deliver our services to the community. Here's some challenges unique to COVID. The legislation provincially required us to close our door to our volunteers, and our volunteers provide a number of different very important roles at the hospice. We had to hire additional staff. Our team had to take on additional roles. Our visitation at the hospice was limited to essential visitors, so our outreach program saw significantly more activity, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And another really big piece for us is we do a lot of fundraising through large community events, and with the pandemic and the limitations on crowd gathering, that had a dramatic impact on our ability to raise funds in the community. Next slide. So what are we asking you? We are asking you to consider supporting our residential hospice as well as our outreach program. We didn't come to Brant County last year to request funding. We did in 2018, and the county supported us with $100,000 for hospice. So we are asking you to do the same this year. These dollars will provide for frontline staff, for hospice patients and their families, for the residential program, as well as the community outreach program. The outreach program, really what it is, they go into, our palliative care staff go into the patient's home, so they have the opportunity to receive care in their home. So even during the pandemic, the hospice continues to serve the community. As I mentioned, our outreach programs have increased dramatically throughout the pandemic. And so this year, more than any other year, we really need the support of the entire community. So please help us to continue the great work of Stedman Community Hospice. Hospice is really here for everyone. And I'm actually going to turn it over to David at this point and let David sort of walk you through the long-term care piece.
Thank you so much, Julie. And good evening, Mayor Bailey and County Councilors. Could you go to the next slide, please? I think, Julie did share that we're seeing a dramatic increase in the demands on our healthcare, and especially within the current COVID environment. And significantly, I think what we've seen, the impact, which has been on the most vulnerable, those within our long-term care homes. And quite frankly, our residents want what we all want for our loved ones and ourselves, to live their lives with as much dignity, comfort, and mobility, and a safe and supportive environment. And this past year, we renewed our mission, vision, values, as well as a new strategic plan. And you'll see those on the screen there. And we know that over the next 5 years, our equipment funding needs at St. Joseph's are going to exceed $5 million. And we know that government funding will not be sufficient. So in response to this need, we are respectfully requesting $70,000 to best support resident safety and security, as well as dignity and comfort. Next slide. This slide here will just give you a snapshot of what does our resident profile look like at St. Joseph's. We can see that 54% are over 85 years of age, and under 65, about 3.5%. The average age is about 84 years of age, and our oldest resident actually just turned 108 on August the 4th. And Edwina had the opportunity to celebrate her birthday with her son and granddaughter and others through a video stream. And just to share with you, Edwina was born in 1912, 5 minutes after the Titanic set sail on that ill-fated voyage. And Edwina's birth predates the automobile, the airplane, the washing machine, the radio, and so on and so forth. And really the point around this is we have individuals who have contributed to our society, and we're here for them going forward in the future. Next slide. And just to give you a sense around what does the health status look of these individuals when they come to us, well, we know that a majority of these individuals have dementia, some form of cognitive impairment. And they also come in an advanced stage, so they have comorbidities, which usually involve issues with mobility. Next slide. So the need that we're looking and requesting is to support resident beds and mattresses. And we have 206 beds within our facility. We have 1 spare. And notably, 81 of those 206 beds came to us from the John Noble home over 16 years ago. And a normal bed has a lifespan of about 15 to 20 years. But we know that replacing these beds means that high-low beds are our first line of defense to protect our residents from any falls, so further injury or disability. The height of these beds can be easily adjusted, not only for transferring, but providing daily care in a safer, more dignified manner. And lowering the bed eliminates the need for bed rails, which we know have proven to be a safety risk, especially those with brain disorders or other forms of dementia. And the need for specialized mattresses allow for better airflow and support, and they lessen the chance of bed sores. The materials which are used play an important role in infection prevention, and they can help prevent skin breakdown and falls. Next slide. So what does that $70,000 look like? We're looking at 25 beds at a cost of $2,000 for a total of $50,000, and then a number of standard and specialized mattresses itemized there for a total of $14,500. Next slide. So I just wanted to take a moment to share with you that at St. Joseph's, our decisions, our practices and care, they're all guided by a desire to support our residents to live their best life possible by minimizing the effects of disease, disability, and injury. And this can only be realized providing the best equipment to care for our residents. Next slide. So we're proud to consider the county as a partner in our mission to celebrate each life with dignity and safety, enriching lives, transforming care always. And we wanted to thank you for your remarkable and longstanding support to St. Joseph's.
Thank you.
Thank
David. Are there any questions to either David or Julie? Councillor Gatwood first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to David. You mentioned about the budget and the request for the beds that you need to replace. We don't have a financial statement here from the St. Joe's Life Care Center, but do you budget for capital projects such as beds going into the future? Because that's obviously a need for the home. And I'm just wondering how, you mentioned $5 million that you needed in the next length of time. How do you allocate funds for those capital needs from your funding, the funding you get from ministry and so on?
David?
Thank you for that question, and it's a very good one. Yes, thank you for the question. Are you able to hear me okay?
Everything's fine.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so one of the things that we do is we put together a 5-year capital plan. It's reviewed on an annual basis. And on an annual basis, it is updated as we look at what things might change within our current environment. So our capital plan not only includes clinical equipment like beds and mattresses, but also building and infrastructure. So our building, as you know, was constructed back in 1955. And so we do need to be looking at a capital plan that also takes into the replacement of roof and windows, heating and ventilation. But we also look at what needs we have in our kitchen for cooking and preparing all of the meals, as well as environmental and housekeeping, just to name a couple of things. We work with our team on an annual basis for them to review what they had on that capital list. We use specific criteria in order to look at each of those items from a safety, legislative, security, health, well-being, as you might realize, to be able to have some ranking and prioritization. And this is how we come up with an annual capital budget. Notwithstanding that, as you know, that the government does not fund us for capital equipment. So the dollars that we do receive in long-term care through our other accommodation envelope is what we would use if there are any surplus dollars to help offset the needs that we have from a capital perspective. And of course, our partner, which is significant, is the foundation that also helps us in that endeavor.
Thank you, David. Joan, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please. You have a question?
No, I don't. Did I raise my hand?
I thought you did. You could have been stretching.
No.
Any other questions to the presenter? Seeing none, thank you, Julie and David, for coming and presenting to us tonight. Councillor Gatwood, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to...
Well, there's a motion, Mr. Mayor, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Miller, that the presentation from the Stedman Community Hospice and St. Joseph's Life Care Center be received as information, and that the request for funding totaling $170,000 be referred for consideration during the 2021 budget deliberations, and that the organizations be requested to provide financial statements as part of their funding request.
Thank you, Councillor Gatwood. Any other questions before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you both again for coming and speaking to us tonight. You're doing wonderful work. We're all very familiar with your facility, and we're glad to have you so close to us. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
We'll now go to 4B, please, and that's Cam Johnson.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Bailey. Good evening, councilors and staff. It's my pleasure tonight to present a couple of reports, but both associated with the corporation of the County of Brant for the year ended December 31st, 2019. The first is just briefly is the short report that you received, and it's the report to the members of Brant County Council. This report's very consistent to what we have seen in the past. It highlights some of our obligations towards council or those charged with governance. Everyone has copies of these reports, I believe. Page 2 of the report, to 3 to 4, highlights our independent auditor's report. We'll see that in a few minutes when we talk about the financial statements. Page 5 of this report is important, where it stresses that our independence, and we're just confirming with council that we are independent of the County of Brant. Responsibility of managements on page 6 highlights just some of the summary of some of the responsibilities. Part of our function is that we express an audit report on the financial statements. It's management's responsibility for the preparation of the financial statements. And then also it's management's responsibility to make representations to us throughout the course of the audit. And at the end of the audit, we always get it's called a letter of general representation. And that's a letter signed by management supporting any of the inquiries or supporting the notes to the financial statements. And we've received that letter. Some of the reportable matters on page 7 just highlight some brief points. Significant accounting principles and policies. I discuss this each year, and this is where it's important that if you want to manipulate your financial statements, you can just change an accounting policy. Public sector accounting standards has put a few other functions in place to try to restrict this, but it can still be manipulated. What we do as part of our function is that if there is a change in an accounting policy, we make sure it's done on a retrospective basis so that the previous year's numbers are comparative to the current years. But we report that there wasn't any changes in accounting policies throughout the course of the year. The one number that does show up in the financial statements is the adoption of the county's respective piece of the John Noble home. In the past, the John Noble home was always considered separate. This year, it was determined with the city of Brantford that the John Noble home would be consolidated on what's called a proportionate consolidation basis. So I think we picked up 27% of the John Noble home this year. So that has an impact on our assets, liabilities, and our operations, similar to how we bring the library into these financial statements. We're now bringing a piece of the John Noble home into the financial statements. That was done on a consistent basis, and the prior year numbers were changed accordingly. Materiality, that's a number that we use throughout the course of the audit. One of the things that we use with that is we take a look at any differences at the end of the audit to see if we're approaching what we have determined to be a material difference. And we report that any of the differences that we had throughout the course of the audit were all minor, very, very minor amounts. all basically just token amounts. And at the end of the day, I think we're under $20,000 differences from our adjustments to what the financial statements reflect. We did come across a couple of items working with Heather Mifflin, and those were adjusted accordingly. And the same as Heather, throughout the course of the audit, if we determined something that could be fixed up, it was certainly fixed up appropriately by Heather. So very well done. Page 8 highlights just briefly the internal controls. So again, all the reporting function has a determined level of controls. Throughout the course of the audit, we test those controls to make sure that they are functioning appropriately, and we report that we did not discover any significant deficiencies in those internal controls. We also did not discover any fraud or illegal acts throughout the course of our audit and inquiries with management. There was no matters related to fraud or illegal acts. We report that we didn't have any difficulties throughout the course of the audit. A little bit different this year, and we'll highlight that in a second. And as usual, I report that with Heather Mifflin and staff, we received excellent cooperation throughout the course of the audit. All of our inquiries were answered appropriately and answered on a very timely basis. Very nicely done. Couple points coming forward. On the last page, financial instruments, not really that significant. One thing that we do have coming forward, starting in 2 years' time, basically, is asset retirement obligations. And they're looking at, similar to how the financial statements now, everyone should be aware, is that they reflect the cost of closing the landfill site, for example. Well, that's a retirement obligation. You have to take care of that site. You've got to remediate it. You've got to make sure that it is properly monitored for many, many years later on. This is a similar idea, but where this is coming into play is this is looking at, well, a perfect example, a gravel pit. You know, a gravel pit has to remediate its pit when it's finished, and it's got to bring it back to where it was, or a viable solution to where it was. This is something similar, but we're looking at things such as buildings, for example. If you have a building that you're going to use throughout the course, you'd probably end up rebuilding it later on. However, if the building was an old building and it had, say, asbestos in it, there's a cost that's associated with remediating that asbestos. Going forward, the financial statements want to look at an estimate of those types of costs. So the costs where an asset that may no longer be functioning for the county, and the cost to remediate it and bring it back to its either its original life or a usable position afterwards. Whitney's, I think, has already talked to Heather briefly about it. If not, she's going to be. Whitney's a manager that's worked on the audit, but it'll be working with them to come up with a bit of an inventory on a go-forward basis. And that's it for this report. Can I ask if, through the mayor, if there's any questions on this? It's fairly consistent to what you've seen in the past.
Any questions for Cam? All right, seeing none.
Okay. I'll continue. Just to highlight a little bit about our audit work this year. We started our audit work right around the middle of February, I think February 18th to 20th. We had staff out there doing the interim work. So interim is before Heather's gotten the year-end numbers together. So before accounts payable or the assets, anything of those are done. But we go in and we take a look, we update our accounting information, we update our documentation, we test internal controls, we make sure that the procedures that are being in place, we test them to make sure that they are functioning. And then we also take a look at revenues and expenditures, because those happen all throughout the year, just not at year end. So that's part of the interim work. And we started that again, February 18th to the 20th, give or take. And then the plan was to actually start the final audit middle of May 11th to the 13th, or May 11th to the 15th, somewhere in that area. But because of COVID this year, that was all put on hold. We never did get out in May. And what we did is we actually commenced the work remotely after that, closer to June, well into June. So we worked more or less remotely. We did have one staff member go back out in, I think it was September or October, to do some capital asset testing that there's too many records. So we were able to get a staff member to go out and do that testing. It did work well. we have found the remote work to take a little bit longer in respects, and it makes sense, where normally when you're out there in the field, if you want to see an invoice, you can go and ask somebody for the invoice and see it 10 seconds later. Now it's an email asking for an invoice, waiting for a copy of that invoice to be scanned. So it's a bit more work at our end. And unfortunately for Heather and her staff too, it's also more work at their end, because now they're pulling and scanning and sending an invoice or putting it into the portal for us. But for the most part, it's worked very well. And then we worked with Heather with the drafting of the financial statements throughout October, and then also bringing in the consolidation of the John Noble Home all throughout October. So the financial statements themselves, you have a copy of those. Page 2 to page 3 is our independent auditor's report. I'm going to suspend with reading it, just to provide the first paragraph. You can see we've audited the consolidated financial statements of the corporation of the County of Brant. And the second paragraph is our opinion. It's where, in our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the consolidated financial position of the County of Brant as at the county as at December 31st, 2019, and the results of operations, its changes in net financial assets, and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. The one paragraph, 2 down, you can see it's a new one this year, is emphasis of matter. All we're doing here is this is just bringing to your attention that we've restated the prior year to bring in the consolidation of the 27% of the John Noble Home. So the prior year numbers have changed because of the John Noble Home. The rest of the report highlights some responsibilities of those charged with governance, and then also our responsibilities throughout the course of the audit. Page 4, briefly, is our consolidated statement of financial position. So this is our balance sheet, our assets and liabilities. Just highlight a couple of points very quickly on this. As you can see, our cash and cash equivalents in good shape, 22,434,000 compared to 18 the year before. Our investments have also crept up a little bit, 36.3 million compared to 35.7. Taxes receivables that have dropped. Our accounts receivable boundary adjustment, as everyone is aware, that number was booked as income. I guess that's 2 years ago now with the boundary adjustment. And now what we're doing is we're bringing down that receivable as the payments are made. And that's going to continue. I think it's on an annual basis until 2027. Our investment in Brant Municipal Enterprises, the last of our financial assets, that's recognizing our investment in that company. And then the change in that each year is actually the change in the income of BME. So this year we've seen an increase of $376,000 compared to the year before. There was an increase of $202,000. Liabilities. At the end of the year, we've got accounts payable and accrued liabilities. Most of that is timing of the year-end payables. You can see the number is reasonably consistent. Our AR was up a tiny bit. Our AP is also up a bit. Deferred revenues, that's a number that is primarily just library and John Noble Home. It's not really the counties. The next number is the counties, and that is the deferred revenues of obligatory reserve funds. We explain that in the note, but it's monies that we receive that is specifically related to something. And you can see it's a fairly big number, $12 million in the current year. Most of that money is coming from development charges. So money that you get for development charges under the Development Charges Act, and it's meant for specific expenditures. And then also gas tax, for example, or any other specific grants that you get that are for an earmarked expenditure, a specific type of expenditure. And you can see that number is at $12 million. Our future employee benefits, that number that hangs around each year, and that's primarily related to like a health, post-retirement and health and dental benefits that the staff have. Net long-term liabilities at the end of the year. We did have a new loan throughout 2016. The big one that's in this is a new Ontario financing loan of $9.68 million. We'll see that. You can see that on note 15. You don't have to flip to it right now. I'll just highlight it very, very briefly. It's actually, it's a 2.66 semi-annual loan. and it's coming due 2039 is the big new loan this year that's in that amount. So overall, we have a net financial asset or a debt this year of a negative amount of 8,145,000 compared to 4.8 million the year before. Our tangible capital assets, again, this is your infrastructure, your buildings, your roads, everything. A net book value of $305 million. We'll see how that changed in a second. Our inventories, prepaid expenses at the end of the year, $930,000. So overall, we can see we have total net assets, 298,631,000 compared to 286 from the year before. Page 5, I'll try and speed this up for you, highlights our revenues and expenditures in the year. So you can see our total revenues, 102 million compared to 105 million the year before. One of the big changes you can see is other income, and 7.4 million, the last line of the revenues compared to 4.7. That number, and also development charges, both of those are depending on what monies are being received. Other income, the key number to that is land sales. You had big land sales in 2018. We didn't see those sales in 2019. Our expenditures in the year, total expenditures, 81,627,000 compared to 76 million. And again, bear with me, you guys, the councillors understand, and the mayor, that these financial statements are a full accrual basis. They're not cash in, cash out. So these have been adjusted for our tangible capital asset purchases, our liabilities, our principal and interest payments. All these numbers have been adjusted. And that's why we have an income before undernoted items in our budget column of 115,397,000. That's been adjusted for, again, tangible capital assets, transfers to and from reserves, etc. You know, you budget that to be zero, and it is zero. So overall, we have in our operations 21 million, and then we take a look at contributed capital assets related to development for the most part, and our amortization of our tangible capital assets. So the depreciation of the assets, 14 million. Overall, we end up then with an annual surplus this year of 11,652,000 compared to 16,527,000 the year before, again on a full accrual basis. I just briefly highlight on the next page, this is the numbers that are kind of nice to see. We saw just then as our amortization or our depreciation, and you can see that up right here is 14,254,000. Here's what we spent our money on in the current year. Acquisition of tangible capital assets in the current year. We actually spent $34,161,000 on tangible capital assets compared to $28,953,000 the year before. Our contributed assets, again, with mostly tied to development, 4.7 million and 1.3 the year before. So you can see we spent a fair amount on tangible capital assets throughout the current year, a significant amount on tangible capital assets throughout the current year. The next page just highlights our sources and uses of cash. So where the money has gone for the most part, but overall we've had a net increase in our cash balance of $4.1 million. So that's where we've gone from 18 million up to $22 million in cash in the current year. The notes to the financial statements have been fairly consistent from year to year. I just highlight briefly on page 11. It's the restatement of the comparative figures. It highlights just how we've integrated John Noble Home into the financial statements. Page 18 is our long-term liabilities. It just brings to your attention that new loan, the 9.53 million that's outstanding at the end of the year. And I've just got a couple of other marked here. And on page 25 is an interesting note this year. And we're seeing this in everybody. And it's a subsequent event note. And this subsequent event note ties to COVID. So COVID has had, as everyone can relate, a significant impact on everything we're doing in the current year. And this is a note constructed by Heather, and it highlights a little bit of the impact of COVID. And we're going to see this. We have a similar note in pretty well every client. Every assurance client is seeing a COVID note because no matter what, kind of business you're in, this has had a significant impact. It's had a significant impact on us. I just actually, you know, we're usually quite happy when we finish our last tax return April 30th. Well, I just did 3 more tax returns this week. People are just not bringing the information in because of COVID. One of the things I'd like to just comment on, and I usually get asked by a counselor this at the very end, is how are we doing? How are our cash balances? How are our reserves? You're doing well. Your cash balances are improving. The issue that we dealt with, you know, 5 years ago, for the counselors that recall, is we had, you know, probably $50 million worth of reserves, but we had $2 million in the bank. You know, we had reserves, but we didn't have any money to actually spend on those reserves that we had earmarked. Things have improved considerably over the years. Page 20 highlights our reserves and our reserve funds. The key is reserve funds. They've been set aside by council. For example, you know, the Brant County power sale is $31 million. Financing reserves, water development, sanitary sewers, etc. Those total work out to $51,419,000. We actually have got a cash and investment balance at the end of the year of $58,793,000. So we're above our reserve fund balance as our cash. We still have to factor in our development charges, but we're certainly going in the right direction. We're getting more and more cash. The reserves are getting more manageable. There's no question you're going in the right direction. There's also no question that the county has gone through some significant development the last few years. The big key item is the development charges that were incurred probably about 8 years ago. Those numbers have been coming down significantly. We also have some development charges that we've expensed in the current year that we expect to recover on future benefits, future development charges that are coming in. And I guess in that vein, if I could ask again through the mayor, if there's any questions related to the financial statements.
Any questions?
A lot of numbers.
A lot of numbers. Seeing none, thank you, Cam.
On behalf of Millards, then thank you very much.
Nice to see you again. Stay safe.
Yes, thank you. Same to you.
Mr. Chambers, what do you want to do with Cam's presentation?
Mr. Mayor, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Coleman that the report to the members of Brant County Council and of the consolidated financial statements of the year ended December 31st, 2018 be received as information.
Thank you. Councillor Bell?
Just one comment, that motion actually talks about 2018 and it's actually 2019.
Oh. That's right, Cam, right? It's 19.
Yes, 2019.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Any other things to be clarified? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care. Good night. Number 5, please. Adoption of the minutes from the previous meetings. Do both at the same time, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that the County of Brant Council minutes of September 29 and October 6, 2020 be approved.
Everyone's okay with that? Any questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Business arising from the minutes? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, on page 2 or page 48 of the minutes, the clerk had received at the near the very bottom, the clerk had received a letter from the Brant Family and Children's Services in response to council's request for a meeting to discuss the proposed merger with Holman Norfolk. has that meeting been arranged, or who is responsible for arranging that?
I can ask Mr. Bradley. I'm prepared to go to that meeting. I'm expecting to go to that meeting, waiting to hear when that meeting is going to be. I don't know, Michael, do you know? Heather, do you? Michael?
Your worship, through you, no, I'm not aware of whether the meeting's been scheduled, but we can look into that. Unless the clerk knows.
A
Heather?
meeting has, as far as I know, the meeting hasn't actually been scheduled, finalized yet. No.
But I will be attending that meeting, Councillor Gatward, when it is. I'm not sure why they're so slow on the booking of that meeting. Because when it first came forward to us, it came forward to us as quite urgent. And now it hasn't been set, so.
Yeah, because I asked last month and we'd received the letter, and perhaps we need to contact the executive director and suggest a date or some dates to meet. Maybe she's waiting for us. I don't know, but I'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Heather, you can make contact with them again for us, please,
Yes, I will do that tomorrow.
and see what they're, in your spare time, see whether they're just waiting for us to get back to them.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Number 7, any other questions? No, seeing none, we'll go to number 7, please. Consent items. Councillor Howes, you have those?
Sorry about that. Get myself off mute.
Yep, just a minute. Councillor Miller, do you want to have something separated?
7A6, please.
I'm sorry?
7A6.
Thank you. 7A6 will be taken out. Okay. Councillor Gatward? Councillor Gatward, I can't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to discuss 7A1, and I have an amendment for it.
Okay.
That is with respect to credit card fees.
Okay, so we're going to vote then. Is there any other? We're going to vote on 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And 7, Mr. Mayor?
And 7, I'm sorry. Flip the page. 7, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're going to go back now to number 1, please. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I read this, I thought, well, we don't want to absorb the credit card fees, the taxpayers in the county. And so to assess the credit card surcharges back to people using their credit cards makes sense. I understand maybe more people are using the credit cards, pay their taxes if they're short. Now that we have COVID going on and people are struggling more, perhaps with loss of jobs or hours or whatever. But I cannot, in good conscience, approve something that isn't equal for everyone. And we are allowing by passing this, payments of up to $5,000 by a developer or a builder or whoever, for them not to pay the 2.6. But yet someone that's struggling to pay their taxes and uses their credit card to do it has to pay the 2.6. So my amendment would be to take out the last paragraph. Says that council approves a 2.6 surcharge for tax payments received via e-commerce, and that all other credit card payments in excess of 5,000. Well, I think we should take out the in excess of 5,000, because I think all credit card payments should have the 2.6% surcharge on them. If somebody wants to build a garage and they've had a really great year and they go in and they want a building permit and it costs, say, $4,000, they can use a credit card and it doesn't cost them anything. Somebody struggling to pay their taxes comes in and pays the $4,000 with a credit card. They have to pay 2.6 extra. And I don't think that's fair. I think everyone should pay the 2.6% when they use a credit card. So that's why I'm wanting to make an amendment to remove those last bits.
Looking for a seconder?
Yes, I'm looking for a seconder, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bell, Councillor Bell is going to second that for you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on it? Councillor House?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure that we can assume that every person paying their taxes with a credit card is necessarily struggling. I think that may be the case with some, unfortunately, but I think there's some that just do it out of convenience, perhaps. And I think we start to venture down a complicated path if for the business part of county transactions, we are adding a service charge fee to every time a credit card is used. So I'm not sure we can just throw this blanket that Councillor Gatwood wants to throw on every transaction.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillor Pierce, before we come back to Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'm in support of Councillor Gatwood's motion here because I agree there is a charge that we would have to pay on that. There's a lot of other companies out there that are charging an extra percentage if you pay by credit card. So I don't think it's a bad motion, and I'm in favor of it.
Any other comments? Councillor Gatwood, you want to come back to you? Yep, Councillor Gatwood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And with respect to Councillor Howe's comment about not everybody's struggling paying their taxes using a credit card. Well, if that's the case, and they're doing it to get air miles points or whatever, some people use their credit card for everything to get points or whatever their credit card plan points may be. And not all credit cards have points, by the way. But if they're just using it for convenience, then why should the rest of us pay that 2.6% on their bill? So I think, to be fair, it needs to be on all charges.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the amendment, but I guess I have a question. Are we allowed to do this? And why I ask that is several years ago federally, I was doing some work on credit card issues in small business. And I know businesses aren't allowed to give discounts for people using another method of payment, right? Because it costs a business less if somebody pays cash. It costs a business less if they use Interact, and less than credit cards, and it costs the most. There's some of it's baked in. Businesses end up charging more because of the sort of hidden credit card fees hidden to the credit card user. But my understanding was, if a restaurant says, we'll give you a discount for charging less, we'll give you a discount if you don't use your credit card, that they can get into some hot water with the credit card companies and have their ability to process credit cards sometimes revoked. So is this in essence sort of giving a different fee? Like, maybe it's because it's labeled as a surcharge, but can I get somebody on staff to maybe clarify if we're actually allowed to do this technically?
Heather Mifflin, are you with us? Heather? Michael? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi,
Sorry,
Heather.
Mr. Mayor. I think Christine is here as well, and she would probably be better able to ask that. I think there is a change that has occurred.
Okay.
Christine, are you there? Down mute? No.
Sorry. Yes,
Oh,
I am.
Oh, there she is. So,
You're allowed to add the credit card fees as a surcharge on top of that, only online. So this report is for only adding it if we actually add the fees to our website and they can pay through our website.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if somebody like Councillor Howes was suggesting comes in and they come into the office and pay via credit card, they won't have a surcharge. That basically it's a convenience fee more connected to being online paying with your credit card than if somebody comes in.
Yes, it's only the online payments. We do not take credit card for taxes at the office.
Oh.
We are actually opening this up because of the problems we had taking tax payments during COVID.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Coleman, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to ask for comments from the author of the report. So, and that just kind of cleared it up right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gatward, do you want to leave your amendment in place?
Well, I'm wondering, after reading the report, it's only for online payments, Christine has said.
Does that make you feel better?
No.
No, it doesn't. So you're going to leave your amendment in place?
Because people that pay online could pay with a credit card. But is Christine saying they can't pay at the office with a credit card?
That's what she said.
So in this time of COVID, if all the offices were closed and the only way they could pay was online, they'd all have to pay the charge if they used a credit card rather than, say, using telephone banking or that type of transaction, because there's no charge for that if you pay through the bank without a credit card online, correct?
Christine?
Yes, this is just giving taxpayers an option to pay. During COVID, we actually had them calling into the office trying to find other ways to pay. We offered them to do the drop-off boxes at all our offices, which were picked up on a regular basis. They have option of telephone, internet banking. They could pay at a financial institution, or they could also pay by check, mortgage company, or pre-authorized payment. So it's just another option if they choose to pay that way and not drop off their check, or one of the other methods we have.
So I guess my question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Christine is, the same payment options are available for people wanting a building permit or to pay a development charge fee. So why are they exempt up to $5,000?
Okay.
Christine?
They are not able to pay through telephone banking or through internet banking, a building permit, development charges, or anything like that. We had the $5,000 limit because developers were in the past putting $100,000 on their credit card, and we were paying thousands of dollars worth of fees. We stopped that practice and we put this $5,000 limit on it 2 years ago, so that we wouldn't accumulate any substantial fees to the taxpayers for the builders and all that using it. So this is just part of our policy that we've been doing. We're just actually able to now to offer it online to them if they so choose to, but they would have to pay the fee.
Thank you, Christine. Councillor Ferrier, please. You're okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. That my question was answered.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Gatward, you're going to let your motion stand. You have a seconder. Are you okay with that, or do you want to pull it off the table?
No, I think everybody under $5,000 should have to pay the surcharge if they're using their credit card.
Thank you. Okay, it's on the table. It's been seconded. We're going to vote on Councillor Gatward's amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Madam Clerk?
Motion's defeated.
Thank you. It's been defeated. We're going to go back to the original recommendation, please. Any questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Number one. Opposed? Councillor Gatward, you're a funny lady. Number 5, please. That was Councillor Miller, wasn't it?
I believe it's 6.
Number 6, I'm sorry.
It was 6, yes.
And
I don't
Councillor
know if
Miller, Councillor Miller, we did have you absent during the discussion on the John Noble home. I didn't bring it up, but it was noted that you had left the Zoom.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's kind of difficult situation. 786. I'm not against the motion per se, but I just had a couple questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
And I did look at the Ontario, the provincial regulation. Unfortunately, it's a lot more lengthier and more complicated than our bylaw. But perhaps you or somebody could answer this for me. Are people still required to wear face masks? I wasn't clear on that. And then I have another follow-up question.
Yes, they are. I'll let Michael speak to that. It is coming up on the agenda further down, but I'll let Michael speak to that.
Through you, Your Worship, people are still required face masks to wear a face covering, as outlined in the provincial regulation. The only difference is that previously it was the emphasis or the requirement was on the individual, and now it's to wear the face covering, and now the onus is on the business owner or building owner or facility manager to ensure that people coming into that indoor space are wearing a face covering.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, that segues, I guess, into my next second question. So as far as enforcement goes, our bylaw should have nothing to do with this. Am I correct on that or no?
Michael?
Through you, Your Worship, no, bylaw enforcement officers are allowed to, and I believe actually in the Reopening Ontario Act are required to enforce the regulations. So notwithstanding that, also provincial enforcement officers such as the Ministry of Labor, and that they have a number of enforcement branches for the Ontario Provincial Police. So there are several, in addition to the officers of the Brant County Health Unit, can all enforce it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I guess I'm learning as we go. I got it today. Thank you.
Councillor McAlpine, please.
I was just wondering if there's fines now involved if somebody enters a place without a mask.
Michael?
And for the...
Yep.
To your Worship, I believe there are. I don't know whether they're in the actual regulation or in a schedule to the regulation. I don't know whether Ms. Zudema's on the line and whether she has addition to that.
Ms. Zudema.
I don't believe she's on as a participant right now.
So your Worship, we can clarify that, but I do believe that there are set fines under the body of legislation that that the face covering rules are in. So, but we can clarify that with a Friday file memo to council.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier first, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I guess to Michael. My question more revolves around the general piece that the province and the county have never been fully aligned in terms of masking. When we were initially doing masking, we were for it. Some read the province not enacting it on a larger level as being against it, and I don't think it's necessarily that, but they were leaving it to municipalities, which there's positives and negatives too. Our bylaw we were able to modify, we were able to amend, and in fact, now that the province has sort of uploaded the legislation their way, it's stricter than ours. So I just want to clarify for those who are watching at home and for the public record, I guess, the amendments that we made are no longer valid. including the pieces around potentially church or also around 5-year-olds and under. It's now 2-year-olds and under. Basically, the provincial legislation supersedes ours in every way anyway, correct?
That's right. Ours expires tomorrow, and it's going to be, we're going to talk about it a little later in the agenda, and we're just going to let ours hopefully expire tomorrow and go back to the provincial directive.
So I guess my other question then would be that unless, if the province repeals it and the county council and county doesn't agree, so facto, then unless the province puts in some sort of rule saying that municipalities can't create masking bylaws, we could still possibly have one or an amended one for whatever length of time afterwards. We may or may not do that, but that's a possibility, correct?
That's right. At a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor House, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine was along the same lines as Councillor LaFerrier, but specific to, we built in to our bylaw an exemption if you have a health issue and you can choose to not wear a mask and there was no onus on you to prove your health issue. And I was just wondering if we could, for the benefit of people who will be watching this and paying attention to these details, if Michael wouldn't mind just clarifying how the provincial rules taking over impact that specific exemption, please.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley.
It's through you, Your Worship. The provincial regulation has a similar exemption and language. So it has a number of exemptions. One of them is including that if you have a health condition that doesn't allow you to wear a mask. And then it says, I'll just read it, for greater certainty, it is not necessary for a person to present evidence to the person responsible for a business or place that they are entitled to any of the exceptions set out above. So it is much the same. We're not asking, nobody would be able to ask a person to prove that they have a health, that they qualify for one of the exemptions outlined in the regulations. I get also, Ms. Zudem has also clarified the earlier question. The fine is $750.
Thank you for the clarification.
Right. And this way too, if we let ours expire tomorrow, then obviously the direction, when people comment or they want us to tell them things, we can direct them right to our MPP, who will take it back to the province and back to the premier, and they can supply the information that needs to be explained for clarification. It takes everything away from the municipality, which moving forward is going to be a whole lot better for us, I believe. Anything else you want to talk about with number 6? Councillor Miller?
Just further to the questions, Michael, you did mention maybe something in our Friday file. If you could get that out, that'd be great. Just something that we have on us to clarify maybe what the main differences are going forward. For example, I guess children 2 years and under now are required to wear one, whereas before it was 5. So anything that could help us with the public questions would be appreciated for the Friday file. Thank you.
Good. That's certainly doable.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything else? Seeing none, call the vote on number 6, please. All those in favor?
You mean number 7A?
I mean number 6. We're at the mask.
7A6.
7A6.
Yeah, 7A6. Thank you. We've already done that. We're now at 7B. Councillor McAlpine.
Okay, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce, the consent items 7BI to 7BXV 8 be received as information.
Thank you. Does anyone want anything? Yep, Councillor Miller.
7B5.
7B5. Yep, Councillor Gatward.
7B7 and 7B16.
Thank you. Any others to be separated? We're voting on everything but the three that have been separated, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're going to come back to number 5, please. Councillor Miller.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions on that report on the airport water system. Have we responded to the MECP's request for information? That's my first question. And the second question is, how does our water department ensure that the MECP gets their timely responses to their inquiries? And in the report, they said 15 days is when they would like to get a response. So first question, did they get the responses that they were looking for? And then the second question is, what has been done or what is being done to ensure that they get timely responses going forward?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Walton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Miller. I can confirm that the MECP has received the responses to the questions as we speak. And in the interim time since that inspection was done, and now we actually have a new standard operating procedure which details how this is to happen. What happened with the information in question is we were dealing with the construction of that project at the same time as this inspection was going on. There's a little confusion over the drawings, what was and wasn't available. The drawings were available, just the right people weren't asked the questions. With the new standard operating procedure, that situation will not happen again in the future.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Councillor Gatward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I asked that very same question this afternoon of staff earlier, and everything was done. And when Councillor Miller raised that, I thought, oh, he definitely read the same report as I did. So thank you for that.
Any other questions for number 5? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Gatward, you wanted to talk about number 7, please. Can't hear you, Councillor Gatward. You're talking to yourself.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Just mute and unmute. Number 7, October 30th is the deadline for applying for phase 2 funding. Have we already sent our application in?
Who's going to take
Through
that?
you to staff.
Mr. Bradley?
Through you, Your Worship, and the treasurer's here. She can. But I think we reviewed the requirements for phase 2, and I believe we do not feel we would be able to make a case for phase 2 funding. So we will, unless council directs us otherwise, we will not be making an application.
Is that how you feel too, Heather? Okay. Councillor Miller, please.
So we,
Councillor
oh,
Adams.
Mr. Mayor, if I finish that off then. So we have enough COVID funding from the government to see us through this pandemic. I believe the phase 2 was to do us through till March of next year.
Heather?
Through you to Mr. Mayor, yes, we, in looking at the projections, the 1.7 that we have received will cover us till March.
Thank you.
Councillor Miller, please.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gatward, I asked that same question this afternoon via email, so I should have shared that email with you. Yep.
Okay.
Same message from Heather this afternoon. Thank you.
Any other questions while we have Heather up here? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Heather. I don't know if you have to stick around or not. No, you don't have to stick around. Councillor Gatward, do you want to talk about Police Services Board meeting minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
On page 303 of our package, Highway 24 North was a focus patrol. And there was a community town hall meeting held regarding traffic safety on Highway 24, which you and some of our council members were invited to. And there was 125 community members from St. George area. So it's very obvious that there's concern in that area of the county. The last paragraph says that a collision analysis and heat mapping analysis was conducted by our regional operational analysts at our detachment or through our OPP service. And the results were shared with the County of Brant and the Brant Safe Streets program. I'd like to see a copy of the analysis results, Mr. Mayor. Is that possible for council members that want to see that, to get a copy?
That's just fine. It can be put in your Friday package also. Is that soon enough?
Great. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on the police services report? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. Thank you. Committee reports. Councilor Ferrier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council. Let's pull it up here. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that the paramedic committee report of October 19th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councilor Ferrier? Councilor Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mark. Just to be clear, that 3.7% increase, that is all for the reserve fund. Am I reading that correctly?
Councilor?
I'll have to take out my
Oh, wait a minute. Heather's up here.
Suited.
Yeah, she's here. Thanks, Heather.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the 3.7 includes the $200,000 added to the transfer to reserve, as well as about 45,000 in just inflationary costs.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's like I said, I was reading between the lines, but that's what it seemed. Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Gatward?
No, I talked to Heather about this earlier today because there was no dollar numbers in the report and I wanted to know what they were. So I got the information, and the 0.7% increase to our funding for the paramedic services budget is yet to be determined, I believe, because perhaps the budget isn't finalized yet. But that's the projected increase. Is that understanding correct? See, we didn't get the report that the committee got.
Heather?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and maybe Michael can assist as well. The report was recommended to both councils. The budget was recommended to both councils for approval.
So I can maybe continue a little bit there through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Ferrier, yeah.
Yeah, so basically we had only one member of the Brantford Council attend the meeting. We all supported the recommendation, but the member from the Brantford Council stated, on the record, and it's videoed, that it may come back from his council. I don't think it's going to come back from ours. That they asked for some of this stuff earlier. They've also had a lot of questions, but at the last meeting, only one member was there. Now, it did pass. It was recommended by unanimously by the four of us that were there. But it could come back. I mean, that's an option that Brantford Council has if they as a council reject the budget recommendation from us as the service provider. So that's why it can't be finalized until we hear back from them. Also, we do have the paramedics have been without a contract since April, but because of COVID, we're extending some of that time and it's on hold. So there's negotiations that'll be happening in the near future as well.
Thank you. Cindy, did you have something to add?
Thanks. Thank you.
Yep. Cindy?
I just, sorry, I don't know if there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to add. I just was going to note that, as Heather noted, the budget was approved by committee, and as she stated, and through our agreement, it now goes to both councils for approval at the respective council level.
Thank you. Any other questions? Cross your fingers.
Yep, cross our fingers.
But it was unanimous for the members that took the time to come to the committee. So I'm hoping that we don't have any trouble getting it passed. Anyway, call the vote on that, please. All those in favor? Opposed? You got that, Heather?
Yep, we're good.
Thank you. Carried. Number 9A, please. Councillor Miller.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Bell, that staff report RPT 20-154 Visitor Impact Review and Action Plan be approved.
Any questions? Councillor Howes first, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have a couple questions to Russell Press, if you don't mind.
Hello.
And Russell is here, I believe.
Yes, he is.
Oh, there he is. Thanks. So my two questions are a little bit connected. First, thanks for this great report. It is a hot topic in Paris, certainly, and I'm sure in other parts of the county as well. My first question is, and I'll ask both questions kind of at once. The first question is, has there been, we have a fairly large BIA presence in Paris. And I'm wondering if there's been dialogue with the Paris BIA or any other county BIAs about the impact of the visitors to the county, positive and negative. And then my second question is, and I purposely didn't bring this up when we were discussing mask laws, but I've heard lots of feedback from members of our community that they become anxious about going into downtown Paris when it's packed full of visitors. And I'm wondering if, in addition to all of your other mitigation strategies here, which are great, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for us to work with the BIA to have some signage in the busy areas to not mandate, but encourage visitors to wear masks everywhere, not just indoors, like not just what the law requires, but I'm wondering if there's a potential for us to consider some encouraging signage that might help bring some peace of mind to the people who live here.
Russell?
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Howes, thank you for the message on the report and for both your questions. Your first question, in dealing with the BIA regarding this, there has been kind of informal discussions with members of the BIA and the BIA executive when we were discussing a range of matters, and Councillor Bell might be able to support this a little bit as well. The BIA has been in a little bit of a state of flux, obviously, during the pandemic, and getting timely responses and communication back and forth with the BIA has been a little bit of a challenge to no one's fault. It's the way that it is right at the moment. But I can say that there has been dialogue with them, kind of a BIA executive member and through correspondence on other matters regarding this. And they will be, of course, collaborated with should this pass and should we begin to implement some of the tactics that have been talked about. So for sure, the BIA will be a very vital part in making sure that downtown Paris is addressed appropriately in terms of visitor mitigation. I hope that answers your first question, Councillor Howes. Second question regarding mask laws. That's a more difficult one, and in dealing with the BIA again, this has come up as an opportunity to do some proactive messaging, and if it's the will of council to include that, of course, and provide a little bit more direction on that, that's something that we can certainly do. It does. We're just we want to make sure that we're not creating a little bit of a situation, a little bit harder of a situation with businesses and with visitors and residents outside of the stores. So we would take an approach that's collaborative, and should downtown Paris BIA be in support of it and direction from council, that's something that we could certainly do. The proactive signage that is planned for the RSVP and Brant program speaks to masking, speaks to hand washing and sanitizing, and of course physical distancing. Physical distancing for sure. We've come up with a little bit of a program for that is going to be very apparent should this be passed and it go through, and it would be not hard to facilitate an add-on when it comes to proactive messaging about masking. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Just a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind. Thank you, Russ. And I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting we add on an extra law that says people have to wear masks everywhere. I am just suggesting that through dialogue with the BIA and that we look at encouraging mask use in places where social distancing cannot be met, even outdoors. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, and just to reinforce what Russell has said, the BIA has been in a degree of, I won't call it disarray, but they've been relatively quiet through the summer. I think this is an opportunity to bring them into the next phase of RSVP in Paris. And I think we can add that to the next agenda, hopefully, Russell. But I also have a general comment that what this summer has taught us is, what are the stress points in our town? And it could be that next year, perhaps without COVID, it's a lovely summer. We're still inundated with tourists. We still will feel the same pressures. So there's an awful lot in what Russell has put in his report that has value, irrespective of the specific circumstances we find ourselves in now. And I think it's a good report, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Ferrier, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Russell. Again, thank you for this report. I think I requested something like this in September, and the turnaround and the thoroughness, and even some of the materials you've sent out to members of council to review, helpful. That said, I want to ask you, because there are some other things happening in the downtown and that downtown area, and I would extend it almost all the way to William and Willow on one end and the park, Alliance Park, on the other. There's some other things happening, and some of it is other departments like park and community services. Things like we're talking today about the interim pedestrian safety plan, the sidewalk improvements, potential for additional parking in the near future when the police stations move out of downtown, some improvements around potential parking restrictions or signage that have already occurred by the Penman Dam. How does this plan sort of fill in with those? Can you maybe speak to that, because it's not just one part, right? It's a couple of other things are happening concurrently.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Ferrier. Yes, there's what we're doing, and that's part of the reason why it's a phased plan, and specifically a three-phased plan. Phase one, mitigating the apparent and obvious risk that we're in, a pandemic, and the tactics that would be employed would be with those foremost in mind, in making sure that we're doing everything we can to align with the messaging, align with the precautions that are being asked of us and made of us. So the signage component and the awareness component, with the other developments that are happening throughout the county and throughout the Paris, and the ones that you've mentioned, those would speak to phase two in specifically, where phase two, to be honest, I feel is likely the most important piece for an ongoing approach to the visitor sector in the county of Brant. Because what we'll be doing is we'll be bringing in stakeholders, both residents, members of TAC, the Tourism Advisory Committee, of course, the most pertinent staff, to look at tourism in the various subsectors of tourism to make sure that there's a baseline of amenities and baseline of safety precautions and facilities available. One of those baseline items would be signage. Another one might be parking, might be garbage receptacles and that sort of thing. And so I think in phase 2, implementing that requirement of going through this with those key stakeholders and getting prepared for putting the best possible foot forward in this visitation sector, one of those requirements would be to make sure that we take the blinders off and we look at all of the other various operations and activities and projects and making sure that we're taking those into account.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Russell? Well, thank you, Russell. The report was great. I knew it would be. You're doing a great job. I'm not sure that we can afford you to keep doing that job, though. You've got too many people in the county wandering around with cameras. So stop doing whatever you're doing. Any other questions or comments? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Russell. (9B), the Physicians Recruitment Program. Councillor Coleman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councilor Ferrier, that the RPT-2170 Physician Recruitment Program be approved.
Questions? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Number 9C, Councillor Wheat, please.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gatward that RPT 20-179, which covers the Market Street extension, reconstruction, and project limits in the detailed design assignment be approved.
Thanks, Councillor Wheat. Are there any questions? Councillor Bell, Rob is here to answer questions, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think through you too, Rob, just to find out when the Paris Master Servicing Plan will come to council for support.
Rob?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell, we would anticipate that that's going to come forward in November. We're working on just the final details of that, ironing out a few things, and it's being finalized right now.
Thumbs up from Councillor Bell. Are there any other questions for Rob? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 9D, Councillor Pierce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chambers that staff report RPT-20-185, the John Noble Home Donation Reserve be approved.
Please note Councillor Miller has left the call. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Someone wants to go find Councillor Miller. There he is. Thank you. Councillor McAlpine, please, for number 9E.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor House that staff report RPT-20-188 Dumfries and Bobby West access Laurel Street modifications be approved.
Are there any questions to the modifications? Councillor House first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. I wanted to just clarify on this one. I understand the report and the details. I believe that the intention from the school board behind at least one of their communications to us was to provide sidewalks on Bobby West Street for students who use that route. And I understand the terrain of that steep hill, and I understand. I just wanted to clarify with staff that with this response and this recommendation, we are saying that the county is not recommending that street be used for student pedestrian traffic.
Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Howes. No, I don't think that actually is what the original concern was. And I have talked to staff. The concern is actually the pedestrian crossing of Dumfries / Grand River Street South to get students to the sidewalks where they can get to the schools and have other pedestrian crossings as they get, either to either of the schools that they could be going to, there, the high school or the public school. So what they're looking for is to get a safe pedestrian access from that area generally through the downtown to the two schools in question. And actually, when we looked at this, it does become entirely evident when you look at the map of Paris and the lack of that pedestrian connection down through Laurel Street and Lions Park through to the downtown. It's a very important piece of infrastructure that we need to get at and get done. And we've talked to them about those students using the sidewalks up King Edward Street and then Laurel Street as the acceptable route there. And they were good with that as long as we guaranteed we were going to do winter maintenance on them, which we have confirmed that will be undertaken. So I've had that discussion and we've given them indication this was coming to tonight's council meeting, and we will now respond to them if this is approved.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor Howes?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, thanks, Rob. That helps clarify. So our understanding is that students walking on Bobby West Street itself is not part of the equation or part of their concern, is what I'm hearing from you.
I would confirm that I have not heard that concern raised. Now, Bobby West has very low traffic counts. And it would be an interesting, when we do get around to reconstruction, that will be an interesting reconstruction too.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So looking at this map on page 396, we're going to bring a sidewalk up at the end of Laurel Street, which is the street that runs to Lions Park, correct? Down that street and then to the bridge across to get them to, what is that parking lot at the bottom in the corner of the page?
Rob?
Through the mayor to Councillor Gatward, that's the parking lot at the pool.
Yeah.
So the sidewalk will go all the way down Laurel Street, and it will go to the pool. But through the infrastructure in Lions Park, there will be a connection through to the footbridge over the Nith River.
And that's at the OPP detachment currently?
Yes, quite
That
close
bridge?
to there. Yes.
Quite close. So then the students would walk down there and up the Broadway or West River to get to Central School, is it? And the high school up further? Are those the two schools you mentioned?
That's correct.
Sorry?
Yes.
Okay. And we are committed to using our sidewalk clearing machines to clear through the park. We would plow Laurel anyway, but we would have to clear the snow and through the park to the footbridge.
That's correct.
And if there was a foot of snow overnight, it would be done for the kids in the morning?
we would meet minimum maintenance standards, and that would be the standard we would try and have as it open for pedestrian traffic as for school. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm clear now.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers, I'm going to have to warn you to be good. Any other questions? Seeing none, we're going to call the vote. All those in favor, please. Opposed? And carried. Thank you. 9F. Councillor Ferrier, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that staff report RPT-20-191 interim downtown Paris pedestrian safety strategy. Say that 5 times fast. Be approved.
Questions? Councillor Howes first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess, to Michael. This is an exciting and certainly interesting interim pedestrian safety strategy, and I applaud all the thinking that went into it. There has been and there's going to be a lot of community questions about this. Obviously, education is going to be an important component of this for both drivers and pedestrians. My specific question is, and this is, I guess it's for Michael or maybe even Rob, whoever has seen the type of crosswalk that's proposed by the county office and down by Tufts, basically the mid-street crosswalk. I know there will be people who are focusing on the loss of the flashing lights, and I appreciate and respect the false sense of security that those lights presently provide. But for people who've seen this type of crosswalk in use in other communities, I'm trying to picture my mom or any other senior citizen standing between the bollards at the bump out. They now have to wait for the traffic to stop rather than walk across. And my question is can you tell us a little bit about how that works? And because I think there's going to be people who right away are saying, let's do that, but keep the lights. And so anyway, if you could, for the benefit of people who are watching this and watching the video later, if you could just explain a little bit more about the dynamic of not pushing a button to get the lights going, not sticking your hand out to point that you're going to cross, but basically, do the cars stop when anyone is standing there waiting to cross? Thank you.
Rob, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, just making sure I got myself off mute here. Through the mayor to Councillor Howes, these pedestrian crossings that we have here in downtown Paris have been in many other locations for a number of years, and there are many other locations where they have gotten rid of them. They cause confusion for the drivers. In fact, when you get close up to them, you can't really, it's hard to see them in some climactic conditions. It's hard to tell that they're actually on. It does give a false sense of security, and many municipalities have taken them out and put more onus back onto the pedestrians to have a safe climate or a safe situation to cross. Now, many drivers are very cautious of pedestrians and are very courteous of them as well and will stop. But some do not. And that's why the pedestrians, and there will be signage if this is approved, warning pedestrians that it's only safe to cross when it is clear for them to do so. One other consideration in the downtown that we've had a look at, from Mechanic Street up to Grand River and William, is about 190 meters. And the spacing of any pedestrian crossings is usually recommended to be at a distance of greater than 200 meters. So within the whole downtown there, if anybody is afraid of using those crossings within the distance usually provided for distance between, we actually do have a safe crossing for them at William and Grand River, which we're going to try and make more safe by implementing the all pedestrian crossing, otherwise known as the Barnes Dance as well. So yes, there needs to be some education here for everybody on this. We believe that it will be safer, and you know, the best thing for everybody is drivers and pedestrians is to be that extra bit more cautious at all times. And then we're providing what we hope will be even more, even a safer situation for everybody at the what we'll call the Barnes Dance and at the north end as part of this. And you know, I've watched many of these people crossing all of these intersections many times, and you know, things do happen there where you shake your head, and hopefully we're going in directions that make those situations be less.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McAlpine, please.
I just wanted to be sort of clear. So at these crossings, a person walks up to them and stands there, and then they would just point that they want to cross and then wait for the traffic to stop. Is that the idea there?
Through the mayor to Councillor McAlpine, yes, they can point if they want. They really need to wait for a gap in traffic for themselves to cross. Them pointing may stop traffic, it may not.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear enough for you, Councillor McAlpine?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what I find very encouraging about it is my experiences with the Zayres parking lot. When people walk up to the series of yellow lines from where the parking lot starts, well, any grocery store, from where the parking stops to the door of the grocery store, people stand there and cars stop. So it's one of those things that really, it's almost proven itself to be effective. I understand taking down lights and hoping that people drive better than they're driving now with lights is kind of a cross your fingers and hope that it works. But really, when you put yourself in a position of any parking lot, even at Home Depot or something, there is a period of empty space between the entrance and the parking lot, and people stop. They just do when they see people. So Councillor Gatward was next. Oh, I'm sorry, Rob, you had a response to that?
Through the mayor to council, one other thing to remember is we are putting the equivalent of speed humps here as well. So that should add a safety measure as well, because cars are going to have to slow down or bear the consequences of going fast over a speed hump. And I think that these speed humps will be effective. So I think that is another useful measure that we are putting in place here. You know, in 3 or 4 years, when we get ripping and tearing in the downtown with the big changes here, then there'd be even, you know, potential of more changes. But this will get us through the period of now till then. And we're ready to roll with a contractor to do this very soon if we approve this. And we only have a few construction days to do it, so before winter. So we're ready to roll.
Thanks, Rob. Councillor Gatward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Where the curbing is going to come in at the crosswalks, some big trucks do deliver in downtown Paris, particularly for the riverside businesses who have no back entrance to deliver to. So there is enough room for a big truck going one way, and I don't know if school buses go through downtown or not, but there's going to be enough room in that narrowing for everybody to get through.
The answer to that is yes. Certainly it's going to be constrained so that people will be slowing down as they're going through. That's the whole idea of this, to make it feel constrained, but there is room.
Great. And yeah, I thought the same thing, where people are going to slow down because they don't want to hit that curb. And the other question then was, the Barnes Dance concept is really interesting. Is there anywhere close in a community where I could go and see that? Do you know?
Through the mayor to Councillor Gatward. Well, a big intersection, if you're in downtown Toronto, Yonge and Dundas, right at the Eaton Centre, is a Barnes Dance. So there's one that I know that have, but one that I personally have worked on in Oxford County is in the town of Tavistock, the main intersection there, which was Highway 59 at one time. And it's an odd shaped intersection. It's got 5 legs to it and odd, it isn't rectangular geometry is I guess what I would say. And that's a Barnes Dance. And actually that intersection was changed so that only one leg of it ever works at a time, because there's confusion of which lanes you should almost go in if you were going both ways on some of these roads. So so there's one where that's within driving distance, and it's a nice drive through the country, Councillor Gatward, for you to go and see that one.
In Tavistock, yes, and you live out that direction, so you've seen it and it was working well.
It's been in place for, I'm going to say, at least 6 or 7 years now.
Great, thank you very much, Rob.
Any other questions? Councillor Bell is next, please.
I think I have to cede to Councillor Leferrier. He's had his hand up 3 times, I think, already. Okay, you're happy to let me go. I just want to say I'm very supportive of this. I've been observing traffic downtown for some time, and my observation says 40% of the people don't actually press the buttons at the existing crosswalks. They just observe and then go. So there's a 60% left we have to educate. And I also notice an awful lot of jaywalking. So people don't even bother to go to the crossings to cross. So I think what we're proposing, together with the raised crossings, will be a definite plus. As for Barnes dances, I've actually seen them and I've used them when I was working in Calgary. They're very, very effective. And I think there's two benefits here. One is pedestrian safety, but I think the way in which the traffic lights can be configured, it means that the traffic flows can keep on going if there are no pedestrians wanting to cross. So I think there's some added benefits there that we can actually take credit for. I think to Rob Walton's point earlier, observing those existing lights in certain circumstances, when it's raining, when it's a little bit dim, it's very difficult to see those lights. And I think we actually do create a hazard for both the pedestrians and the drivers in that situation. So I think what we're doing by removing them, by putting in those extra barn stands, putting in the raised crossings, I think this will be very positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry about that. I truly didn't see your hand.
It's okay. No, me and Steve raised them at the same time, but that's okay. Happy to go last because I've been holding my powder, but I do have a lot of questions. I'm completely supportive of this. I'm going to be voting for it. I love it. I am so happy it came to council, and I think it's great work. But I do have some questions because I have opened this up to the community and I have received a lot of feedback, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask some of these questions in this forum. So one is there a disadvantage to doing all of this and keeping some or a portion of or all of the crosswalk lights? Can you just kind of go through the process that came to the reason why? I know Councillor Bell just sort of spoke to it, but that's the first question.
Rob.
Through the mayor to Councillor Leferrier. So the question you're asking is whether we should phase this or just do it all at once. I think this is one where you have to rip the bandage off and take the hair with it. Short-term pain and education, and let's get to where we need to go. I think that, first of all, we're at a time here where we need to, if we're going to do the raised crosswalks, we need to do them now or next spring. There's no in between for those. I've been a proponent of getting rid of those overhead lights since I understood what the problems were here, quite frankly. So I think the time to do it is now. And I don't think the education process should be that hard, because we're going to put up good signage there, warning people that, crossing, there's no lights you have to cross at your own risk and with caps. I think phasing it would make things actually keep some of the confusion and then have the improvements at the other. And which one would you pick as to where you did the one and didn't do the other? So I'm positive for doing the whole project and getting it going. We've been working towards the Grand River Street North and William one for some period of time because we had to get the infrastructure changed so that the controller was there to allow the phases that we needed in there. There's a few other things we need to do. That's ready to go whenever our contractor can do it this fall. So we've been working on that one for a while. The decisions on the other two came up, through discussions and other considerations, relatively recently, although we've been thinking about what to do for a while.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that response. I also imagine that's something we could always look at, lighting, et cetera, and crosswalk lights of a different kind when we're doing our non-interim, when we're actually doing the downtown master plan and enacting it and the rest of it if needed.
That's correct.
My next question is about, so you talked about the signage for pedestrians, but there's going to be, I imagine, signage up the hill leading into downtown for drivers saying that this is new, something to look out for leading in, so that drivers, the same way when you have the new stop on Willow and William, there's the new sign. We're going to need something there because for those who are just coming into town, who've been here a bunch, especially tourists, but others, they'll just think it's business as usual and end up going over that hump pretty fast.
Through the mayor to Councillor LaFerriere, we'll have to think of what signage to do. This is a little bit different than usually when you're putting up those new ones, you've changed something dramatically. So at Grand River Street North and William, the changes there with the pedestrian cycles and whatever, people will understand what they are once they've been through them a few times, but you're not putting up new signals and the like. So the new, how we advertise that, and you got to watch out for sign pollution or signs with so much verbiage on it that you're taking away people's eyes off the road to read things as they're coming through town. So this is a little bit different there. We'll have to give some thought to that for sure.
So I imagine then, through you, Mr. Mayor, coming down the hill, maybe even just new speed humps or something coming down for the drivers coming down may be appropriate because there are people who, it's a speed problem there, especially at night. And those humps, what's great about them is they will help with the nighttime speed as well. If you've ever stayed at the Arlington, you can hear it all through the night, right? It's no longer going to be a bit of a drag strip there at night. So my other thing would be, is there any discussion about lowering the speed limit through the downtown?
Rob?
I actually wasn't at your meeting last week, unfortunately, so I don't know what the discussions were at that meeting. It's certainly something that we could consider as in a future report.
Okay. Just 2 or 3 more quick ones, I promise. People complain a lot about the trucks and the oversized cabs and all that, but we can't legally ban any street legal vehicle from parking in our angled parking spots, correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor LaFerriere, we have some of those trucks that need to come to these businesses to deliver goods. So that's a very difficult thing to wrestle with changing.
Yep, no, absolutely, and don't necessarily want to. Just again, it's something that's come to me, and I'm taking this time to ask it because it's appropriate for the time. 2 more. One, so the green time, will that be the green time for cars? Basically, things will be at the Barnes Dance. It'll be pedestrian only or vehicle only, but the time for the vehicles to move, that'll be extended then from what it is now, because currently when that green time happens, it's the only time to turn right, one way in. However, if somebody's crossing or if somebody's backing out of the angled parking north of Grand River Street, it doesn't matter, you still can't turn right. So that time will be extended and actually help traffic flow while increasing pedestrian safety. I read some reports, 50% less vehicle pedestrian conflict with these barn dances. Does that all sound right?
Through the mayor to Councillor Ferrier, yeah, it all sounds more or less right. You got to watch out when you say you're extending times there, because there's only so much time. You can't add in time indefinitely to these things, because then you do intersect. So we have to look at the most efficient way to do things. But what we do know in this is that there's no pedestrian crossing when nobody pushes the button.
Right.
So that is only called by people asking for it. So that is where you get the efficiency of the cars. So at times when there's no pedestrians, you're moving more cars. So that for sure we can add into there. We will be looking at the other phases to trying to do them most efficiently. And that's something that, you know, after it being in for a while, we'll have analysis on and try and make it as efficient as possible. Now, we're just finishing up the, are finished up the public review on the Grand River Street North Master Plan, and then the whole idea of removal of the angle parking to the north of the intersection too, then is when that could be implemented, comes into there too, which is again another efficiency. And then the lane painting. So none of those things will actually happen until next spring, but I would anticipate by next spring we'll be able to implement the other measures at Grand River Street North and William to get. It's 8 o'clock. Done.
My last question is about painting for you, Mr. Mayor. When we've had, I get a call or an email from different people every 2 weeks, every month about painting of lines downtown, specifically actually related to possibly having a rainbow crossing downtown. And I know we've talked about it. The Pride group has talked about it. The police have talked about it. The downtown BIA has talked about it and been in support. Is this a time where we could maybe enact that or if it's waiting till next spring, but is this an opportunity to kind of do that as well?
Through the mayor to Councillor Ferrier, I think that's something that needs to wait till next spring. We have our hands full to get done what we promised in this report now, and we're certainly the time of year. So we're October 27th today. Line painting season's pretty near over.
Right, understood. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate this report, and I'm fully supportive of it. I just had a lot of questions from residents I wanted to make sure I got through. So thank you for answering all of them.
Are there any other questions? I think it's a great report too. I think it's a great idea. We've been tasked by people that say that things aren't safe the way they are, and this is something we can afford to do right now. It's not part of ripping up the whole town. It's not going to take forever to do, and people are going to see that we took action on what they said wasn't working. So there's a whole lot of reasons I think to do it. And if Rob has the time set aside to do it right away, I certainly can support it. It seems like the right thing to do when we can afford to do it right now. So any other questions or conversation before we call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 10, information reports. We have none. Communications. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my absolute pleasure to move this resolution. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Coleman. The correspondence from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change redesignation of the former Paris Town Hall, now called Bucket Center, as a National Historic Site be received as information.
Yeah. Any questions? It's wonderful news. There's been a lot of people working on this for a lot of years. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it is great news. And I read the minutes and they declared it back in December. I wondered why it took till October for them to let us know.
I'm not.
Do you know?
I don't know. Michael, do you know? Heather, do you know? Michael?
Through your worship, no, we received notice about a week ago that the release would be coming out. So
Then the nice thing about the timing of this too is wonderful, because I know that Mayor Eddy and Mayor Bucket are both received the news and they were both very happy. And the timing couldn't have been better for either of them because they were both big fans of the project. So I'm very glad that it happened now, because I know how much they wanted it to happen. It's good that it did. Any other questions or concerns? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried to receive. B, the Middleport Heritage Society request. Who has that? Is there anything provided for us?
No. There is no written resolution. I'm not sure which direction council wants to take on this or if staff have some comments.
Okay, I'm sure that Councillor Gatward has something on this. Councillor Gatward, are you waving or hiding?
No, I have my hand up. Thank you.
All right, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think it would be great to meet with this group. So I'll make a motion that the mayor and ward councillors, that's who they're asking for, and the staff person meet with the Middleport Heritage Society to discuss their requests.
Seeking a seconder?
We,
Councillor Wheat wants to do that. He wants to second it. Any other comments or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We'll send word that we're interested. No. Any questions? Resolutions?
Yes, I had.
We have a
I
question?
had one question.
All right.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, at the beginning.
That's
Can we
right.
approve the agenda?
That's right.
And thank you. And my question is, when is the moving date for officers to our new detachment? And what is the grand opening date?
I believe it's the 24th, Councillor Gatward, but I'll let Cindy is still here. Cindy,
Thank you.
there you go. Cindy, could you
Hi.
let Councillor Gatward in on the festivities, please?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The date is set to move in on November 24th. There's a lot of parties working hard to make that happen right now. We are focused on that currently, but we will be working on a grand opening that's appropriate for the circumstances. It won't be what we had originally envisioned. However, we will put together something, and when pandemic passes, hopefully we can do something on a bigger scale like we had originally planned.
Councillor Gatward?
So will we be doing it in 2020, the I guess adjusted grand opening in 2020, or are we waiting until spring?
Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't set a date yet for it. I have spoken with Inspector Anderson a while back about having something in the new year once they're settled in. So we were looking at doing something on a smaller scale early in the new year.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think probably, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Councillor Gatward, but the cornerstone on the building does say 2020. And I was just hoping that history would prove that it was finished and they were working in the building in 2020 as the cornerstone suggests. I mean, the cornerstone was a gift from a business, and I would hate to think that the cornerstone would be skewed by the actual date of the occupancy of the building. So just something that when we're doing the plaquing of the building with all the names of the committee and things that made all of that happen at the detachment, that the date somehow reflects 2020. Just so that history.
Thank you.
Is that what you were thinking, Councillor Gatward? Councillor Gatward, is that what you were thinking?
Similar, yes, Mr. Mayor. And I guess I expected that, you know, the servicing was complete, and thought maybe they were already moving in, but I guess the final moving date is November 24th. And will the current detachment building be empty then by, say, the end of November?
Cindy?
And we'll,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the dispatch staff will be moving shortly after the OPP move in. They'll be transitioning afterwards. So they will still be in the building into early December and then transitioning out.
I see. And one other question I just thought of, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Cindy. The new furniture is moved into the detachment, is it? I expect it is. And then there's 3 new fire halls. And I'm wondering if some of that good furniture that's at the OPP detachment can be used in the fire halls where needed. If they have old fire furniture in those 3 detachments or 3 fire halls that need to be replaced. I'm just thinking, rather than take all that good furniture out of the detachment and sell it or whatever, we might be able to use it in the fire halls, that's all. Will that be looked at?
Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the new detachment does have the new furniture in and ready. As part of the 2020 capital budget, there were funds for new furniture at the new fire halls, and we have gone through a process to select a vendor to provide furniture for the fire halls, which has been ordered and ready to come in when the halls are at a point where we can have the furniture delivered. I'm not sure what the plan is for the furniture at the existing detachment, but can follow up on that.
Great. And the old fire halls too, the furniture. I guess if it's all going to be surplus, or, we may find places to use it. I just thought we could use it at the fire halls, but if we're getting new, then it's all going to be surplus. So thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Councillor Gatwood. Thank you, Cindy. Any other questions? I don't think there was any. We'll go on to number 13, which was resolutions. There aren't any other business. There weren't any talked about in camera. Councillor Gatwood, please.
Yes, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that County of Brant Council convene in camera to discuss potential litigation matters and advice subject to solicitor client privilege and a labor relations employee negotiations matter.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat.
Yeah, before we go in camera, I'd just like to make an announcement. Word came to me today of the passing of Howard Snodgrass, a local planner who I've had the privilege of dealing with for the past 17 years. A truly first-class gentleman, and he's going to be sorely missed by the development community in this municipality, and I'm sure by our planning staff in dealing with Howard for the past number of years. And Howard will certainly be missed at local planning meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Councillor Chambers.
Yes, thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor Wheat. It was a shock to me, and Howard was well known in the county. I believe Councillor Gatwood would recall he was the planning consultant for Oakland Township and for Burford Township before amalgamation. And he started his career in planning as a county employee prior to setting up his own consulting business. So he was a county employee back in the early 80s when he started his career. You may not know that Howard and I, we grew up together. He lived just down the road from me, and we spent the summers working for my father on his tobacco farm. And we were roommates in university, so I knew Howard very, very well, and he will be missed. He was an excellent planner and an excellent human being. So thanks for bringing that forward, Councillor Wheat.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. I'm going to call the vote now to go in camera. All those in favor? Opposed? Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Could you do it again for me for the second time?
Yes, it's moved by myself, second by Councilor LaFerriere, the bylaw 112-20 through to bylaw 121-20. Now be read a second time on all preamble questions be resolved.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Councillor Wheat, the third time, please.
It's 9 o'clock.
We got to
9
vote on that
o'clock.
first, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor, second reading? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Third time, please.
Moved by myself, second by Councilor LaFerriere, the bylaw number 112-20 through to bylaw 121-20. Now be read a third time, passed, signed, and sealed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Third reading? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. There's nothing else for the good of the county of Brant. Number 17 is our adjournment. Next meeting will be November the 3rd at 6 o'clock. Same format. Motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Pierce. Thank you. Good night. Thank you for all you're doing to keep the county safe.